The wind howled across the barren landscape of the planet. Red dust swirled in the air, covering everything in a thick layer of grime. The ground was cracked and dry, with jagged rocks scattered about like the remains of a shattered world. The sun, a dim glow in the dark sky, provided little warmth, just enough to cast long, eerie shadows across the horizon. The world seemed lifeless, and it was, at least to most eyes. In the middle of this desolate wasteland, a figure stumbled, her movements slow and labored. An alien girl, the last survivor of a once powerful race, limped through the desolation. Her body was bruised, bloodied, and her energy was running low. She had barely escaped an attack from the alien empire that had destroyed her people. Now she was alone, completely alone, on a planet no one cared about. Her species, once known for their mighty technological prowess, had been wiped out, and she was the only one left. The girl's once beautiful features were now marred by exhaustion. Her skin, a pale blue hue, had taken on a sickly tint, and her bright, intelligent eyes were clouded with pain and despair. Her silver hair, usually kept in neat braids, hung loosely around her shoulders, dirty and unkempt. She clutched a small, intricate device in her hand, the last remnant of her people's advanced technology. It was her cloaking device, the one thing that had kept her hidden from the alien empire's forces. But now, it was failing. The device buzzed weakly, flickering on and off. The girl's heart pounded as the glow of the device dimmed with every passing second. If it failed completely, she would be exposed to the very enemies that had destroyed her race. She couldn't afford to be seen. Her only hope of survival was to stay hidden, to remain a ghost in the shadows. But as the device sputtered, so did her hope. She could hear the distant hum of alien ships in the air, their scanners searching for her. She knew they would find her soon. Her cloaking device had kept her hidden for days, but now, with it malfunctioning, it was only a matter of time before the enemy would notice her. The cold truth settled in her chest. She was alone, and soon she would be caught. The last of her kind, abandoned by everyone, to die on a dead planet. Her legs wobbled beneath her as she collapsed to her knees, her breath shallow and ragged. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away angrily, refusing to show weakness. There was no one to see her now anyway. She had long given up hope that anyone would come to save her. The humans, whom her people had once looked down on, were weak, insignificant. No one cared about her anymore. She was a symbol of the lost and forgotten, the last of a civilization that had been erased from the galaxy. She tried to rise, but her body refused to cooperate. Pain shot through her side as she attempted to stand, and she cried out in frustration. With no energy left to fight, she sank back into the dust, her eyes closing as the sound of alien ships drew closer. And then, just as the first of the enemy's creatures emerged from the shadows, she heard something that made her blood run cold. A footstep. She froze, the hair on the back of her neck standing up. Who was there? She had been alone for so long, but now something was wrong. The sound of a boot scraping the earth reached her ears, followed by a low grunt of exertion. The girl's heart skipped a beat as the figure stepped into view, the human. He was tall, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the fading light of the sun. His face was covered by a helmet, his body armored in black and gray, blending in with the shadows. A human soldier. She had only heard stories of Earth's warriors, brave but foolish, fighting battles they couldn't win. And yet, here one stood, in front of her, a stranger in a strange land. The soldier was crouched, his weapon drawn, scanning the horizon. His sharp eyes quickly fell on her. The girl tried to push herself up, to flee, but her body was too weak. The soldier's gaze softened as he saw her condition, his expression unreadable behind the helmet. In an instant, he moved. His hand reached out and gently helped her to her feet, his grip firm yet kind. He didn't speak, just motioned for her to follow him. There was no time for questions, no time for hesitation. The girl's heart hammered in her chest as she looked up at him. Why was he helping her? Why was this human soldier saving her life when no one else cared? She wanted to ask him, wanted to demand answers, but her throat was dry and no words came. Instead, she simply followed him, unable to resist his commanding presence. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to trust no one, but something about this soldier felt different. Something about him felt human. As they moved, the alien creatures that had been tracking her began to close in, their eyes glowing in the fading light. The soldier didn't flinch. He didn't even look at them. His focus was entirely on her. The girl watched as he lifted his weapon, taking careful aim at the approaching creatures. His hand moved with precision, firing round after round, hitting his targets without hesitation. The creatures screeched in pain as they fell, but the soldier didn't slow down. The girl could barely keep up, her legs weak and trembling from exhaustion, but she pushed on. She didn't know why she followed him. Maybe it was the way he moved, so sure, so confident. Or maybe it was the way he looked at her, as if she was more than just a survivor. She didn't know, but something inside her stirred. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the fight was over. The soldier stood, breathing heavily, his weapon still raised. The creatures had retreated, their attack thwarted. He glanced over at her, his eyes scanning her face. Without a word, he motioned for her to follow again. The girl, still in shock, nodded slowly, unable to form a single coherent thought. She wasn't sure what to make of this human soldier or why he had come to her rescue. All she knew was this: for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. And in that moment, as they walked together into the dying light of the planet's horizon, something deep inside the alien girl began to awaken, a flicker of hope. Who was this human? And what would come next? The answers were unknown, but for now, she was no longer abandoned. And that in itself was enough. The desert winds whipped around them. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the alien girl wasn't alone. She couldn't quite process the fact that a human, one of the species she had always been told was weak and insignificant, had come to her rescue. The soldier's hand was steady as he led her deeper into the ruins of the ancient city. She glanced up at him, confused, her thoughts racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Humans weren't supposed to be here, not on this planet, not in her life. She was the last of her people, and everyone had turned their back on her. Why are you doing this? The question had been gnawing at her since the moment he appeared from the shadows. She had seen humans only in passing, a primitive, desperate species, hardly capable of fighting against the likes of the alien empire that had destroyed her race. Yet here this soldier was, protecting her. She couldn't understand why. The soldier didn't answer immediately, his focus still on the horizon. The ruins they were passing through were ancient, a testament to civilizations that had risen and fallen long before her people's extinction. Their once mighty technology had failed them, and now only crumbling structures remained. The soldier's eyes narrowed as he scanned the area, his weapon at the ready. She could tell he was no stranger to this kind of situation, his movements calm and deliberate. "I was sent on a mission," he finally spoke, his voice steady but edged with something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. "To rescue anyone who might still be alive. We've been fighting the Empire for years now. When I found you, I knew I couldn't leave you behind." The alien girl didn't know how to respond. Her mind was swirling with doubt. She had been taught that humans were weak, that they could never stand against the Empire's might. The stories she had heard painted them as insignificant pawns in a larger game of galactic conquest. But the way this soldier spoke with such conviction, there was something about him that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, the humans were more than what she had been led to believe. "We've fought for survival," the soldier continued, his eyes now meeting hers. "For years, we've been fighting a losing battle, but it's not just about survival anymore. It's about proving that we belong in this galaxy, that we're more than just a footnote in the history of others. The Empire, they think they're invincible, but they're not, and we'll show them that. The girl studied him, her gaze lingering on his face, searching for any sign of deception. But there was none. He wasn't like the others, those who had abandoned her and her people. This soldier wasn't here for some selfish reason. He was here because he genuinely wanted to help. And for the first time since the destruction of her civilization, the girl felt a spark of something she hadn't experienced in what seemed like an eternity. Trust. But just as she was about to say something, a low hum filled the air. The sound of engines. The alien ships were coming. The soldier's head snapped up, his hand already reaching for his weapon. "They're closer than I thought," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "We need to move now." The alien girl's heart raced as she felt her cloaking device flicker weakly again. She cursed under her breath as the familiar, pulsing glow dimmed and sputtered. She had barely managed to keep it working long enough to escape the initial assault, but now it was failing her once more. She could already hear the hum of the enemy drones, their sensors locking onto any sign of life. If they found them now. The soldier didn't hesitate. He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her along behind him. "Follow my lead and stay close. If you want to survive, you need to trust me." She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she could trust him entirely. The feeling of being chased, hunted, was too familiar. Her race had been prey to the Empire for so long, and now, as the girl ran beside the soldier, she could feel the weight of the past on her shoulders. She wasn't just running from the alien empire. She was running from the loss of everything. Her people, her culture, her home. But as she looked at the soldier, she couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. They moved quickly through the ruins, ducking behind fallen walls and rubble, weaving in and out of the crumbling structures. The soldier's pace was swift, his eyes never leaving the horizon as he guided her through the maze of debris. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. It was clear he had done this before. The sound of the enemy drones grew louder, their mechanical hum reverberating in the air. The girl's heart pounded in her chest as she felt the tension building. The soldier was already preparing for the worst, his weapon raised and ready. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Get ready," he said. "They'll be here any second." She braced herself, trying to steady her breathing. She had fought alongside her people before, but that had been with advanced weapons, with technology that was no longer available to her. Now, with only her instincts and the soldier's training to rely on, she felt vulnerable, exposed. The first drone appeared in the distance, its glowing red sensors scanning the area. It was followed by more, dozens of them, flying in tight formation, their weapons ready to fire at anything that moved. The soldier didn't hesitate. He aimed and fired in one swift motion. A burst of energy shot from his weapon, striking the first drone mid-flight. It exploded in a flash of blue light, sending sparks raining down. But the remaining drones weren't far behind. They changed course, heading straight for the ruins where the soldier and the girl were hiding. "Move," the soldier barked. The girl didn't need to be told twice. They ran again, zigzagging through the ruins as the drones opened fire, their lasers cutting through the air. The girl's heart raced as she sprinted, trying to keep up. The soldier was ahead, his weapon blazing as he shot down one drone after another. But there were too many. They couldn't fight them all. With every shot, the soldier's movements grew more frantic, more desperate. The drones weren't the only threat. The sound of heavier footsteps, alien soldiers, could be heard approaching. The girl's cloaking device was almost useless now, its energy rapidly draining. They were running out of time. They reached a narrow alleyway, but it was blocked by a wall of rubble. The soldier cursed under his breath as he turned to face the girl. "We're not going to make it through this unless we take them down." The girl's eyes widened. She had never fought against such overwhelming odds before. But something inside her stirred, something she had almost forgotten. Her people might be gone, But the spirit of resistance, the will to survive, was still alive in her. She nodded. "What do we do?" The soldier flashed her a grin, a hint of pride in his eyes. "We fight, together." And with that, they prepared for the battle ahead, their fates entwined by the choice the soldier had made, one that would change both of their lives forever. The tension between the soldier and the alien girl was palpable. The girl's mind was a whirlwind of emotions as they fled from the enemy, their every step more desperate than the last. Her heart was pounding, but she wasn't sure if it was from fear or something else. The soldier's words had been planted in her mind. He was protecting her, not just because it was his mission, but because he seemed to believe in her. But why? Was it because she was the last of her people? Or was it something more? They were still running through the ruins, their footsteps echoing in the empty city, when the ground suddenly trembled beneath them. The sky above, which had once seemed calm, began to darken. A deep hum filled the air, and the ground vibrated harder with each passing second. The girl's eyes widened as she looked up, seeing the shape of massive ships looming overhead, alien warships belonging to the empire that had destroyed her people. "Move, now," the soldier shouted, pulling her along with him. They dashed through narrow alleys, trying to find cover as the sound of the warship's engines reverberated in the air. The girl's mind raced. She knew what this meant. Orbital bombardment. They were about to be obliterated. The city, once bustling with her people's advanced technology, now stood as nothing more than a graveyard, and the Empire wasn't going to let anything remain. The girl could hear the distant roar of the weapon systems charging, and before she could react, the first wave of destruction hit. Explosions rocked the ground, sending plumes of fire and debris into the sky. Buildings crumbled around them, and the heat from the blasts washed over them like a wave. She ducked instinctively, but she could feel the soldier's hand gripping hers, urging her forward. They ran faster, the destruction of her world playing out in real time in front of her eyes. She could feel the panic rising within her. Her heart was racing, the world around her spinning as the weight of it all settled in. But then something unexpected happened. A strange energy stirred inside her, an intense power surging through her limbs, flowing from deep within. Without thinking, she reached out, and the rubble ahead of them lifted off the ground, as though obeying her silent command. The soldier stopped abruptly, his gaze locked on her in disbelief. What the hell was that? The girl could hardly process what had just happened. She had no idea how she had done it, only that she felt something within her awakening, something that had been dormant until now. She could feel the power swirling within her, just beneath the surface. It was as though her very soul was alive with energy, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Are you okay?" The soldier's voice was tight with concern. She nodded, but she could feel herself growing dizzy. It was like the energy within her was trying to break free, to take over her body completely. It was too much to control. Before she could respond, a deafening explosion rang out behind them. A piece of a nearby building crashed to the ground, narrowly missing them. The soldier grabbed her by the arm and pulled her forward again, forcing her back into motion. "We need to move. Now." They sprinted away from the chaos, weaving through the crumbling city, but their escape was short-lived. The sky above was filled with more ships, alien warships that had arrived in full force. The massive ships were circling, creating an impenetrable barrier in the sky. And that's when it happened. A large, heavily armed warship descended directly in front of them, cutting off their escape route. The girl's heart sank as she saw the size of the ship. This wasn't just any enemy vessel. It was the flagship of the Imperial fleet, and it was here for them. They had nowhere to run. The soldier didn't waste time. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice calm, despite the situation. "We're not done yet." The girl followed without question, though her mind was racing. She had never been in a situation like this before. Her people, though mighty, had never faced such overwhelming force. And now she was left with nothing but her instincts and the soldier's determination. Together, they had to find a way out. The soldier activated a small device on his wrist, and a moment later, a sleek, futuristic vehicle appeared from the shadows, a small, armed transport ship. Without hesitation, he pulled the girl inside, and they took off at full speed, darting toward the horizon. But the warship wasn't done. It fired a barrage of laser blasts, the explosions lighting up the sky as they narrowly dodged each one. "Hold on," the soldier shouted, pulling the controls hard to the left to avoid an incoming blast. The girl gripped the seat, her knuckles white as she tried to stay grounded. The ship rocked violently as the blasts kept coming, but the soldier's hands were steady. He was focused, calculating, and in control. Then the girl felt it again, the power surging within her. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling it swell up from deep within her chest. Without thinking, she raised her hand, and just as a massive laser shot toward them, a force field erupted from her, creating a protective shield around the ship. The laser collided with the shield and dissipated harmlessly, the ship shaking from the impact, but remaining intact. The soldier stared at her in awe, his expression a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "What the hell are you?" The girl, still stunned by what she had just done, shook her head. "I don't know. I didn't mean to." "You're not just some survivor, are you?" he said, his voice a little softer now. "You're something else." The girl wasn't sure how to respond. She had always known that she was different, that there was something about her powers, her abilities, that set her apart. But this, she was more than just a survivor. She was a weapon, and the soldier was starting to see it too. As they raced across the planet's surface, evading blasts and pursuing ships, the girl began to realize that her abilities were only just beginning to surface. She could feel the energy inside her, growing stronger with each passing moment, responding to her will. It was as though she was connected to something greater than herself, something that had been waiting to awaken. For the first time since she had been abandoned, the girl began to feel something she had never known before: purpose. And she wasn't about to let this soldier down. But the chase wasn't over. The warship was still following them, and there was only so much time before they'd be caught in its path. The soldier kept his focus on the mission, but deep down, he was beginning to question everything he knew. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It wasn't just about defeating an empire. It was about protecting her, this girl who had become something more than he ever expected. His emotions were tied to her now, a bond formed in the heat of battle, and there was no turning back. He wasn't just fighting for his mission anymore. He was fighting for something much bigger than himself. The girl was learning how to harness her powers, and together, they might just have a fighting chance. But the question remained: could they defeat the empire, or were they simply running out of time? Their escape was just the beginning, and the soldier couldn't help but wonder what the future held for them, whether they would survive this war, and, in doing so, change the fate of the galaxy. The hidden base was a far cry from the war-torn streets the soldier and the alien girl had fled from. It was dark, cold, and silent, tucked deep beneath the surface of the planet, far from the reach of the Empire's searching ships. It was a temporary refuge, a place where the girl could catch her breath, and the soldier could assess their next steps. For now, they were safe, but both knew that safety was a fleeting thing in a world consumed by war. The soldier had set up a small, improvised training area in one of the base's abandoned rooms. The walls were barren, the floors dusty, but it was enough. He had made it clear from the start. The girl would need to learn how to control her powers if they were going to stand a chance against the alien empire. She had already displayed a glimpse of her abilities when they narrowly escaped the bombardment, but it was clear that she wasn't sure how to control them, much less understand them. That was where the soldier came in. The training was tough. Each session was exhausting, but the soldier pushed her hard, determined to help her tap into the potential he knew she had. At first, she struggled. She was overwhelmed, confused, and frustrated by the raw power inside her. Every time she tried to summon her energy, it felt as if the power was out of control, surging wildly without any direction. But with the soldier's calm guidance, she began to focus. Little by little, she started to harness her telekinetic bursts, her energy shields, and even a strange ability to manipulate the environment around her. Each success, no matter how small, made her feel stronger. She was starting to understand her abilities, and with each passing day, she grew more confident. But as she trained, the memories of her past continued to haunt her. Her people's destruction, the emptiness left behind when her entire race was wiped out, and the crushing isolation of being the last of her kind. She couldn't escape the pain, but she didn't want to show it. Not yet. One evening, after an especially grueling training session, the girl sat on the floor, her energy drained, her mind overwhelmed. The soldier noticed the exhaustion in her eyes and paused, his usual stern expression softening. "You've come a long way," he said, offering her a bottle of water. His voice was kind, almost gentle. "You've got control now, but there's still more to learn." She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She wasn't sure if she was ready to keep fighting. The weight of her past, the guilt of surviving while her people had perished, was a burden she couldn't shake. Her fingers tightened around the water bottle, and she swallowed hard, trying to push the pain down. "What happened to you?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you survive? How do you keep going after losing everything?" The soldier's face hardened for a moment, but it quickly softened as he sat down beside her, his eyes looking far off into the distance. "I've lost comrades, friends, good people who fought and died to protect others. But the fight doesn't stop. It can't stop. If we stop fighting, then everything we've lost, everything they died for, is in vain." The girl studied him carefully. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that she hadn't expected to see. It wasn't the hardened soldier she had come to know, the one who never wavered, the one who acted as if emotions were a weakness. It was a man who had seen too much, lost too much, and was now carrying the weight of all those losses with him. "And you risk your life for me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why? Why me? I'm just the last of my people. What's left of us is nothing." The soldier turned to face her, his expression soft but firm. "Because you're not just the last of your people. You're not some relic of the past. You're a survivor. You're fighting, just like me, just like the rest of us." Her chest tightened at his words. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just an outcast. She wasn't alone. The soldier's words made her realize that humanity, despite all their flaws, had a strength she had never recognized before. They were survivors, too, fighting against an enemy that seemed unstoppable, just like her. She felt a deep connection with him, one that went beyond words, beyond survival. It was a bond formed in the heat of battle, a shared understanding of what it meant to lose everything and still keep fighting. Days passed, and their bond continued to grow. The soldier continued to teach her, pushing her to understand her abilities and how they could be used to fight back against the Empire. But it wasn't just about the training. They started to talk more, sharing stories of their pasts. The girl began to open up about her people, about the beauty and strength of her race before the Empire destroyed them. She spoke of their advanced technology, their peaceful society, and the pride she had once felt for her people's place in the galaxy. The soldier listened, never interrupting, never judging. It was clear that he saw her differently now, not just as a survivor, but as an individual, a person with a story, a person with emotions, with a past that shaped her. And he shared his own story too, his battles, his comrades, the lives he had lost, and the pain he carried with him. "I don't know what will happen next," the soldier admitted one night, as they sat by a small fire in the base. "But I know this. I won't leave you. Not after everything we've been through. You're not alone in this fight." The girl's heart swelled at his words, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to feel hope. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't alone. She had someone fighting beside her, someone who understood what it was like to lose everything and still keep fighting. But even as their trust in each other deepened, there was an underlying tension. The alien empire wasn't far behind. They were closing in, their forces relentless. The girl could feel the weight of their pursuit, like a storm on the horizon, getting closer with each passing day. She could feel it in her bones, the sense that time was running out. They didn't have much longer before the final confrontation would begin. And when it did, the girl wasn't sure if they would survive. But one thing was certain: she wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference. The distant sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the hidden base, shaking the ground beneath their feet. It was a sound they had feared for days, a sound that made their blood run cold. The alien empire had found them. The last refuge, the only hope they had, was now under siege. The soldier stood in the entrance of the base, watching the incoming assault with steely determination. His hand gripped his weapon tightly, the weight of his responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. Beside him stood the girl, the last of her kind. The girl who had become more than just an ally. She had become his reason to keep fighting. Together, they had trained, fought, and survived. But now, their fight was about to reach its peak. The alien empire's forces were vast. Their ships loomed ominously in the sky, casting dark shadows over the base. The soldier knew that this was the end, but he wasn't about to give up without a fight. The girl had already proven herself more powerful than he could have ever imagined. Her abilities, once wild and uncontrollable, had grown more refined. She could manipulate energy, control objects with her mind, and even create shields that could withstand the strongest of attacks. But the soldier knew that each time she used her powers, it took a toll on her. She was weakening. "Get ready," the soldier said, his voice calm but urgent. "We're not going down without a fight." The girl nodded, her face set with resolve. She had come to trust him, and in return, he had become her protector, her last hope. The two of them had fought against impossible odds before, but this time, the odds were stacked higher than ever. The enemy's forces descended like a storm, overwhelming the base with their sheer numbers. Massive warships hovered overhead, while dropships unloaded hordes of AI-controlled robots, each one designed for total destruction. The soldier and the girl took their positions, knowing this was their final stand. The first wave came crashing in, a swarm of mechanical enemies moving with deadly precision. The soldier fired with expert accuracy, his rifle cutting through the air as he eliminated targets with cold efficiency. Beside him, the girl unleashed her powers, sending bolts of energy hurtling toward the robots, disabling their circuits and causing them to short-circuit and collapse. But even with their combined strength, the enemy kept coming, relentless and unforgiving. The soldier's heart raced as the battle intensified. The ground trembled beneath their feet as orbital bombardments rained down from above. Explosions shook the base, sending debris flying through the air. The soldier ducked behind cover, barely avoiding a blast that sent shockwaves through the walls of the base. But they didn't have time to rest. The enemy's assault was continuous, pushing them back further and further. The soldier and the girl fought side by side, using everything at their disposal to repel the attack. The soldier's combat skills were unmatched, his movements precise and calculated, while the girl's powers became more and more destructive, her telekinetic bursts tearing through enemy ranks. Yet, despite their best efforts, they were slowly being overwhelmed. The soldier could see the toll the battle was taking on her. Each use of her powers drained her, weakening her body. Her face was pale, and her movements were becoming slower, more strained. He had to protect her. He couldn't let her fall. But then, the unthinkable happened. A massive AI-controlled warbot, towering over them like a mechanical giant, emerged from the chaos, its weapons aimed directly at them. It fired without warning, and the soldier barely managed to dodge the blasts. He quickly returned fire, But the warbot's armor was nearly impervious. The situation was growing desperate, and the soldier knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The girl, sensing the danger, stepped forward, her body glowing with energy as she prepared to strike. But as she summoned her powers, her body faltered. She gasped, her legs shaking as she collapsed to her knees. The toll of using her abilities had finally caught up to her. "No," the soldier shouted, rushing to her side. "Don't." But the girl only smiled weakly. "I have to stop them. Now." With all the strength she had left, she gathered the energy inside her and focused it on the warbot. A blinding burst of power erupted from her hands, hitting the machine squarely in the chest. The warbot's systems short-circuited, and it collapsed to the ground in a heap of sparks and smoke. For a brief moment, the soldier thought they had won. But the girl's victory came at a heavy cost. She slumped to the ground, her breathing shallow, her body drained of energy. The soldier knelt beside her, panic rising in his chest as he tried to steady her. "Please, don't," he whispered, his voice breaking. He could feel her fading, the light in her eyes dimming. "Stay with me. We can still make it." But the girl's smile remained. "I've done my part," she whispered. "Now, you must finish it. You are humanity's last hope." The soldier's heart shattered as he looked down at her, knowing that she had given everything, her life, her powers, her future, so that he could survive. The weight of her sacrifice was unbearable, but it also lit a fire inside him. He couldn't let her death be in vain. He wouldn't. Tears welled up in his eyes as he gently closed her eyes, placing a hand on her forehead. For a moment, the battle around him seemed to fade away. The sounds of gunfire, explosions, and chaos disappeared as he focused on the girl's final words. He was humanity's last hope now. He had to finish what they had started. With a final, determined breath, the soldier rose to his feet, his resolve stronger than ever. The enemy forces were still pressing in, but he wasn't going to let them win. The girl had given him a chance to fight for something greater than survival. It was time to honor her sacrifice. The soldier sprinted into the heart of the battle, his weapon blazing as he fought with everything he had left. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for her, for humanity, and for the future that they all deserved. The final stand had begun. The soldier moved silently through the dense alien landscape, his eyes narrowing as he gazed at the looming stronghold of the alien empire. The memories of the girl's sacrifice burned in his mind, fueling every step. She had given everything for him and humanity's survival, and now it was his turn to finish what they had started. He would make the alien empire pay for what they had done to her race, and to countless others. With the help of a small but determined group of human resistance fighters, the soldier had infiltrated the alien base. It had taken days of planning, sneaking through enemy lines, and fighting off patrols to get this far. The stakes were higher than ever. Failure meant more lives lost, more innocent beings sacrificed. But the soldier knew he couldn't fail now. His mission was no longer just about survival. It was about vengeance, justice, and the memory of the girl he had grown to love. The enemy base was heavily fortified, guarded by advanced drones and AI-controlled security systems that could detect even the slightest movement. The soldier moved with purpose, using every ounce of his training to stay undetected. His team had already planted explosives at key points throughout the base, ensuring that once the mission was completed, the enemy would be left with no chance of recovery. As he moved deeper into the compound, he came across a hidden chamber, its entrance guarded by a high-tech security door. The soldier quickly disabled the security systems, using a special tool to hack into the lock. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, revealing a darkened room. Inside, he found something he hadn't expected: survivors. The girl's race, thought to be extinct, was still alive. These survivors were hidden in secret chambers, protected from the alien empire's genocidal actions. They were weak and frightened, but they were alive. The soldier couldn't believe it. The girl's sacrifice had not been in vain. There was hope, but the hope was fleeting, for the war wasn't over yet. The soldier knew he had to finish what they had started, to defeat the alien overlord who had ordered the destruction of an entire race, including the girls. The soldier left the survivors in the care of his resistance group, promising to return for them. His focus now shifted to the heart of the enemy base, where the alien overlord waited. The final confrontation was near. The soldier fought his way through the enemy's defenses, his heart racing as the sounds of gunfire echoed in the halls. His mind was focused only on the task ahead, on the need to avenge the girl and her race. His weapon blazed as he took down enemy soldiers, their faces twisted with hatred and superiority. But the soldier didn't care about their faces. They had caused too much pain, too much loss. This battle wasn't just for survival, it was personal. Finally, he reached the heart of the stronghold, the command center. There, waiting for him, stood the alien overlord, a towering figure surrounded by a squadron of elite soldiers. The overlord's eyes glowed with malice as he regarded the soldier, who stood before him like an unstoppable force. "You're too late, human," the overlord sneered. "The girl's sacrifice was in vain. Your people are weak, and they will fall like all others before us." The soldier's grip tightened on his weapon, his anger boiling over. "You're wrong. Her sacrifice was not in vain. We're stronger than you think." The battle that ensued was nothing short of legendary. The soldier was outnumbered and outmatched by the alien overlord and his elite soldiers, but he wasn't alone. The girl's powers, which she had passed on to him before her death, surged through him like a second heartbeat. The soldier used her telekinetic abilities, calling on her strength to turn the tide of the battle. With a burst of energy, the soldier threw himself at the overlord, his mind connecting with the girl's powers. The alien overlord tried to fight back, but the soldier's newfound strength was overwhelming. The very weapons the overlord relied on were turned against him. The soldier twisted the very air around them, using the girl's power to dismantle the enemy's advanced technology. The overlord's forces were no match for the combined might of the soldier's combat skills and the girl's powers. The alien overlord, realizing that defeat was inevitable, let out a final desperate roar, but it was too late. The soldier unleashed the full extent of the girl's powers, and with a final, crushing blow, the overlord was brought to the ground, his life extinguished in an instant. With the overlord's death, the alien empire's grip on the galaxy began to crumble. The once feared empire was now a shattered remnant of its former self, its leaders toppled, its forces in disarray. The soldier stood victorious, but there was no joy in his heart. He had avenged the girl's death, but the cost had been immeasurable. He could feel her presence with him, her memory etched into every victory, every step he took. As the alien empire fell, the soldier returned to the survivors. He led them back to safety, ensuring that they would have a future, one where they could rebuild their race and live in peace. The girl's memory would live on in them, and humanity's place in the galaxy had been forever changed. The soldier stood in the ruins of the enemy base, gazing out at the stars. The war was over, but the battle for peace had just begun. The girl had shown him the true meaning of strength, sacrifice, and love. In the end, it was their bond, human and alien, that had saved the galaxy. As the last remnants of the alien empire crumbled, the soldier whispered a promise to the stars. "I will never forget you. Your sacrifice was not in vain." With that, he walked into the future, the memory of the girl's love and sacrifice guiding him, knowing that their bond would remain a symbol of hope, unity, and the victory of humanity over all odds.